I'm Seth Anderson, proudly represent the Madison Southern FFA chapter, competing in the forest management and products placement proficiency. Forestry is something that's really defined me as a person that I've really put my full self into the past few years of my life since I got into it as a sophomore in high school. It's something that's really important to me that I've tried to develop myself in as much as I could and to hopefully one day turn it into a future career. After discovering my interest in forestry my sophomore year of high school and getting involved in, of course, summer camps, and that allowed me to be able to grow myself enough to find interest in taking part in the internship with Berea College, and then, of course, getting all those skills and the knowledge that I gained there was able to allow me to be able to go on to continue my work into being able to be employed by Copperhead Consulting. But one thing I do want to do at this time is try to talk about some of the things that I wasn't able to mention in my proficiency. One thing that I actually did talk about in my proficiency was, of course, the controlled burns that I did with Berea College. But one aspect of that I didn't mention is how my work that I did with GIS technology, where I actually was able to go out with one of my coworkers there and was able to use that technology in order to map out the boundaries of the burn areas and basically create a map so they could have a reference whenever they did the burns. That was a really interesting experience in getting to get that first-hand knowledge in a really new area in environmental science that's developing. Another thing that I haven't really mentioned about is what I've done since the end of my proficiency. And after my first year working with Copperhead that I did mention, I've gone on to do a freshman year at Eastern Kentucky University, majoring in wildlife management. I'm now have done a second summer working with Copperhead Consulting, where I was able to actually secure myself $2 an hour pay raise. Since then, I've gained a new lead forester, and I was able to gain more independence. On the question of what advice would you give to others getting started in forest management and products placement SAE, you gotta really get out there. You gotta see what you can find. You gotta get involved in your community. You gotta be able to look for those opportunities that are out there for you to be able to expand your knowledge and be able to grow yourself as an individual in the field of forestry. A lot of it is just advertising yourself, meeting people and, letting them know this is what I'm doing, this is who I am. And that really allowed me to be able to find opportunities in my future working with Copperhead. I met people at the forestry camp that I took part in that had ties to Copperhead, that knew who I was and knew the basic knowledge that I had. And all the experience that I gained taking part in competitions and doing internships and was really what just allowed me to be able to grow as an individual. You gotta really just get out there and you gotta get involved and you gotta meet people and advertise yourself. So on the question of if you're an employer at Berea College Forestry or Copperhead Consulting, what's the first major change you'd like to make in the business? So Berea College is really tied down to the university and exactly what they can do and how they can expand. So it's a whole lot harder for them to basically change the operations that they're already doing there at the university. But Copperhead, of course, being their own company, has a whole lot more leniency, is a whole lot greater availability of how they can grow and change the business. So if I was an employer at Copperhead Consulting, I'd like to hopefully try to expand them into new areas of forestry. Since the few years that they've actually had a forestry program there at Copperhead, they've really always focused on timber stand improvement projects, and I'd like to hopefully expand them to other areas of forestry like timber surveys and controlled burns, and actually hopefully like marking timber for sale. And I'd like to actually try and expand them more into the private sector and now the government sector. So on the question of how are your skills you mentioned in your application impact your goal of working for a federal agency, beyond of course just making me more employable, federal agencies really focus a whole lot on trying to minimize the impact that the human population has on their environment and really just being that higher authority to be able to manage the environment and try to maintain and protect our environment so we still have the same, availability of natural resources that we have today, and to be able to maintain and ensure that future generations can take part in the same beauty of the outdoors that I've been able to take part in. And that's something that's really important to me personally. So a lot of skills that I focused on and my proficiency really kind of tended to focus on diminishing human impact on our environment so we can still have the same ability of natural resources in the future to be able to take part in. And that's something that's really important to me that I think will have an impact on my employability in the future.